Hi folks, we're Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this radio, audio, no pictures live stream. In this essay, I'd like to do a bit of a think piece and go back to 1965 and or around that time, and what was referred to as the Hart, H-A-R-T-Celler, C-E-L-L-E-R Act, which was a change to the immigration laws of the United States. Now, it effectively was the beginning of the opening of the floodgates for mass migration. In itself, it wasn't the mass migration sort of catalyst, but it was certainly the beginning. It certainly opened up migration to be far wider than it was, and didn't seem to be in itself the opening of the door to mass migration. But without that, first very important step, mass migration as we know it today may not have happened, or certainly not have happened in the time frame. Now, let's look at the world back in 1965. The Immigration Act, and I'll simplify this a bit because it can get complicated getting stuck in the weeds of the details, but the immigration status of the United States beforehand is that there was a preference for people that spoke English and had skills and qualifications. So it's hardly an issue there. That was the preference. So as a result, and just the speaking English or being able to, or having the skills and qualifications, that gave a lot of preference to, say, people from Britain, for example, or the British Isles, or people in Western Europe, Germans and Scandinavians, that sort of thing. And so, and those people alone supplied plenty enough to fill all the immigration quotas that the Americans had. There were other things, like in any given year, there couldn't be more than 20,000 immigrants from any one country. Now, if you sort of divide England up, or Britain up, into Wales, England, Scotland and Ireland, you could have 80,000 plus coming just from the British Isles each year. So there was no problem in the Anglosphere of getting enough people to fill all the immigration quotas and give quite a decent amount of immigrants per year. So now, technically the amount of immigrants was 200,000 or something like that per year, but the reality was different because the disqualifiers were substantial. If you were believed to have communist sympathies, you were a homosexual, or you'd been an activist of any sort, then whether it be a union activist or something else, then you would have a much tougher time getting a visa. There's very little interest in say, people from Mexico, the peasants from Mexico. So if you were an illiterate peasant, your chances of getting legally migrating to the US were pretty slim. There were some sort of dispensations for, say, California and Texas farmers along the border. They could bring over day workers. So there was some latitude in that, or people coming in on short-term work visas, although that wasn't huge, but it did go on. But the reality was that America was getting plenty of migrants, everything they needed, certainly in the skilled area. Most of those coming from, not all, but most of those coming from the British Isles. There'd been a bit of a thing from the post-World War II refugee camps. Quite a few people had come from there. But anyway, there was no need to change the Immigration Act. Everything was fine. America didn't need more immigrants. It didn't need different immigrants. Why would any country want illiterate peasants from the third world? You wouldn't, and nor did America want them, nor did any Western country want them or need them. So why was the Immigration Act changed? Now, Hart was of Irish background, and he was in his late 70s when he put his signature to this act. And Celler was Jewish, and was very much fighting the Jewish corner there. Again, reminding everybody that look what happened in the 1930s and so on. But really, there was no reason why you'd want to change the Immigration Act, because the Immigration Act, as they wanted to change it, was to allow illiterate third world peasants into the West, into the United States, and to allow people with communist, homosexual, activist backgrounds to come into the United States, this sort of thing. So really it brought, particularly from, say, places like Yugoslavia, as it was then, Serbia, Croatia, as it is today. So it just, even looking at it now, or even at the time, it just made no sense. Now, it was sold as being humane, and it was equality, and it was equity, and it was everybody loves everybody, summer of love, and kumbaya. It was sold along those lines at the time. Somehow it was the just and right thing to do, but it's hard to see, well, why? Sure, okay, maybe it's just and right, but why? Well, what will you gain from as in America? What will America gain from this? What will America achieve out of this? That was never really explained, other than it was all very, very touchy-feely, wonderful, good, and we all love each other. The Kennedys were right into it. Robert and Edward Kennedy were there, and Lyndon Johnson, and there were a lot of lefty lovies there saying how wonderful it was, and bring me your tired, hungry, and poor, and statue lens on this. Now, at the time, following particularly the Suez Canal crisis in the late 1950s, just a quick background. The Suez Canal was owned by a British-French company who'd built it, and the Egyptian government was getting all nationalist and all Arab nationalist and so on, and they just seized the canal. The British went in with some Israeli help to get the canal back, but the Americans kiboshed the whole thing, thinking it'd be too provocative. It'd get the Arabs offside, Arab oil. It didn't want the Soviet Union, very powerful military force at the time, and the Cold War getting more excuses to become more active in the area. So the Americans kiboshed it. Now, this had the effect of furthering and emboldening Arab nationalism. And the Arab nationalism at the time involved, in fact still does, involved wiping the state of Israel off the map. They didn't consider or recognize Israel as a legitimate state back in the day. So this was quite a big issue. Now, Arab nationalism going hysterical, all talk, we're going to wipe Israel off the map. Now, the Americans took the view that they couldn't have a big military presence in. So if Israel, for example, if Israel was getting overrun, then the Americans considered it just way too risky, in terms of the Soviet Union, the Cold War, and so on. They considered it way too risky to go in there with heavy military force to rescue Israel. So, well, what's our plan B? What do we do if Israel gets overrun? We can't protect the country militarily by sending in, boots on the ground and everything. We can't do that. We can give them lots of weapons, airstrike. There are things we can do, but we've got to have a very sort of aloof approach to this. So what do we do if Israel gets overrun? You've got the, at the time, 3 million or so Jewish citizens, like Israeli citizens. Where are they going to go? What are they going to do? So we can't bring them into the United States with the current immigration laws. So just in preparation for the possibility of Israel's going to be overrun, we really need to change the Immigration Act here so that we can seamlessly bring in these people on the basis of some sort of humanitarian, rhetoric and propaganda. And was that the background thinking? Now, if we look at the toing and froing of the day as well, there'd been the standoff over the Cuban Missile Crisis. So the Americans had installed missiles in Turkey, and the Russians were rather put out by this. The Soviets were rather put out by it. So they installed missiles in Cuba, which is, of course, just 100 miles off the coast of the United States. So the deal was, after the Cuban Missile Crisis, the standoff and the various backroom pushing and shoving that went on over that, was that the Americans took their missiles out of Turkey, the Soviets would take their missiles out of Cuba, and so that was the done deal. but the tensions and the disquiet and the fever pitch nature of the Cold War was still there, and the Americans and many others believed it wouldn't take much to ignite a third world war, and that would Israel or the Arab attack and overrunning of Israel, would that be an issue, and would that be a flashpoint for war? As indeed people are even considering the conflict in Israel or around that area today as being a potential flashpoint. So nothing's changed over that nearly 50 years. But one could argue that really the Hart-Celler Act had nothing, because it just wasn't needed. It had no point to it, no purpose to it. We need to change the act so it's changed their immigration because point to it, no purpose to it. We need to change the act so it's changed their immigration because we want to be a bunch of lovies for third world peasants. No, I don't buy that. We want to have more homosexual communists coming into the country. No, don't buy that either. So my feeling in a wider angle lens is that change to the law, particularly given Celler was involved, that change to the law, immigration law, was in effect laying the groundwork for the possibility that Israel will be overrun by the combined Arab forces. Because you're looking at Egypt, Jordan, and Syria, and all that sort of stuff, and the likelihood that the Israeli military armed forces would survive such an onslaught was considered to be minimal, even though the Israelis were well supplied with American weaponry and various military technology, ranging from jets to tanks to you name it. Now, as it turned out, people may know I think it was called the 6-Day War, and the Arab attack on Israel was incredibly clumsy, and they were relying just on numerical superiority to sort of win the day. And the Israeli, with a lot of huge amount of American logistical support, the Israeli armed forces were able to pull off what even today it must rank as one of the most stunning military successes in military history. If you want to do some more research on that, look at names like Moshe Dayan and so on there, Menachem Begin and people like that. Look at those sort of even earlier than that. Some of the work of David Ben-Gurion, who, by the way, was Polish Jewish. So the mass exodus of Israelis out of Israel, because it would have been overrun, that didn't happen, and the 6-Day War, if you like, I suppose, at least from a military perspective, legitimized the state of Israel in a way that pure negotiations couldn't have done. But nonetheless, so was the Hart-Celler Act preparation for a possible upcoming event that ended up not occurring, but was kept there just in case it was needed, but ended up then being used to bring in millions of illiterate Mexican peasants for reasons that are causing untold problems to the US even today. So just an opinion piece, a think piece. Let me know your thoughts below. You've been a Tacitus today, you're a Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.